President Biden now has been selling off parts of Trump's unfinished border wall that was contracted to be 400 miles long. This is an apparent bid to thwart new GOP legislation, which calls for the federal government to either use the material or give the states that will. That's New Mexico, Texas, or Arizona, or California. Now, keep in mind, this passed. The Senate, it was a Republican-sponsored bill, but it passed with Democratic support. It just needed to be offered to the House and passed in the fall. Senator Tom Cotton joins us now. He's sponsored the legislation. Senator, this is outrageous what's going on.
Brian, it really is outrageous. You can't make it up. The Biden administration inherited around $260 million worth of border construction materials from the Trump administration. They immediately put it in storage on day one when Joe Biden said he wasn't going to build the wall. They've now paid $300 million to store it for 2 years, more than the cost of the material themselves. But as soon as Senate Republicans, led by Senator Roger Wicker, who is the leader of Republicans on the Armed Services Committee, began poking around and asking questions about it earlier this year, the administration began to sell these materials for less than 2 cents on the dollar. The legislation that you mentioned is Senator Wicker's legislation, which I was pleased to join. It was added unanimously by Democrats on the Armed Services Committee to our annual defense bill. And now the administration is racing to try to sell off all of these materials because they would rather have taxpayers take a massive loss of hundreds of millions of dollars than give them to the governor of Texas, for instance, to build the border wall, or to allow them to be sitting around and used to build a border wall when Republicans take back the White House in January of 2025.
So this is pure vengeance. No one thinks that a wall solves all the problems, but it blocks and it funnels to other areas which can be staffed. And they're not fully staffed. They're being overwhelmed. We pay for this, and they're wasting this. This GovPlanet line auction house has picked up the pace, as you mentioned. They have sold 81 slots already, 30 feet high, for $154 million of the $260 million bollard fence. So this is awful. Anybody buying this scrap steel, it's an unpatriotic move. If you care about our nation's borders, if you are a major corporation, don't show up for this auction.
Yeah, Brian, and apparently the administration is trying to silence the auction house as well. You know, this is a fairly typical operation for things like excess meals ready to eat or excess ponchos. That's why we have Army surplus stores around the country that sell these materials. It's a horse of a different color when you're talking about barrier material to try to protect our southern border. I mean, in the last 2 years, Joe Biden has allowed at least 250 people on the terrorist watch list to arrive at our southern border. That's not even counting the people who the Border Patrol didn't catch. So we have no idea how many terrorists have entered our country. At the same time, we're selling this material for pennies on the dollar. That's kind of Bidenomics in a nutshell, the total lack of common sense.
Yeah, total lack of common sense. And in terms of Roger Wicker, the senator says it shows they have no shame. I just want you to do something legal you can do to stop them from wasting taxpayer money and thwarting legislation that had been passed and repurposed for this purpose. Hopefully you'll find something, Senator, before it's too late. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Brian.